All right, welcome back to Morning Line. Nick Barris along with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association, taking your calls, talking guns, gun laws, questions about weapons. Even if you have a question just about a gun you're thinking of buying or you're a collector, this guy knows his stuff when it comes to handguns and rifles. Listen, Joe asked the question about that controversy up at the legislature. Should guns be allowed there? You know, could you carry them in? And of course, the Department of Safety right now won't allow you. There's metal detectors that's posted there. I think they've tabled it, maybe because they were saying it was going to cost too much. But deep down, I wonder if some of those lawmakers just don't want people with guns up there, even though they'll say otherwise.
Well, the ones that they need to be afraid of are their peers, I think, because it's pretty vicious across the party lines.
Yeah.
But, you know, the issue of guns, Joe made an interesting comment. It may have gone just to the side. There is no statute that prohibits citizens from having guns in the legislature or the Capitol, or for that matter, most public buildings except for courtrooms.
Okay.
Okay? So the reason, I can remember when these gun laws passed in 94, and then were being redone in 95 and 96, I could carry a gun in the legislature back then as a civilian. The reason for most of the last 20 years we haven't been able to carry a firearm in the legislature is because Jimmy Nafee and John Wilder, the Democrat leaders at the time, put those signs up. They're just posted like you would post a movie theater.
No guns allowed.
No guns.
Okay.
So there's no statute. It's totally because the Democrat leadership wanted it that way. And then we had this push of the Republicans saying, elect us, we're for smaller government, less taxes, and your rights. And they get control, and we've got Beth Harwell and Ron Ramsey, and they leave the Democrat signs up and say no guns in the General Assembly. Well, last week or 2 weeks ago, Lieutenant Governor Ramsey comes out, and I applaud him for this, and says, these signs don't need to be here. Basically, he's acknowledging that over 21 years now of having, 22 years of having guns in civilian hands, there's really not been a problem. That 11 states, including Texas and Virginia, allow their citizens to carry in their legislatures. He says, let's take the signs down. And it's a little conflicting about, or confusing about how the news stories run, but apparently Speaker Harwell sort of agreed with that initially, because Ramsey said they'll be down probably next week. And then we have these news reports that say Speaker Harwell decided that she didn't want to waste the taxpayers' money because the Department of Safety estimated it was going to cost $1 million to retrofit the legislature so that civilians could have guns in the legislature.
So you're saying the signs that are up are more or less a suggestion. Now, it's enforced by Department of Safety, and there's metal detectors there.
Right.
But if you know, this was just a decision, as you say, you know, by Nafee and Wilder several years back, putting up those signs, it's not by the force of law.
But it is. The statute under which they post makes it a Class B misdemeanor.
Okay, so it is then. Okay, so because I mean, it would be easy enough to just
ignore it,
get rid of the metal detectors and tell the cops there not to address the issue, leave the signs up, and just go about your business.
You don't even have to get rid of the metal detectors, because what they do in 2 of the states that I'm aware of is that the people with handgun carry permits, when they come in, they show their carry permit. See, we've got a special turnstile now for lobbyists and legislators.
And you believe they go through with their gun? You think they're bringing guns in on there?
Oh, I'm certain of it.
Okay.
At least one.
Okay, so there's guns
but they
there
can swipe a card, and they don't go through the metal detector, and they don't go through any background check. You know,
because they're back and forth every day, and they work there.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And the average citizen can't get that card.
Right.
Okay. Well, there's no reason at all that you couldn't have those machines scan your permits just like they do whatever card they're issuing, so that you go through that line. If you've got a valid permit, you just go through. And everyone that doesn't have a permit or a lobbyist card or legislature credentials goes through the regular background check, you know, with the metal detector, so they can make sure you don't bring a pair of scissors up there or something.
It's interesting that they would want to keep a scissor or knife out and not a gun.
Well, you know, you could cut up a bill or something.
Yes. Now, we were talking during the break, as a matter of fact, though. Rick mentioned it, and you talked more. There are bullet holes in the marble stairways there, right?
Not of recent vintage, but there are.
We're talking about going back to the 1800s, right?
1800s, I mean, that's correct.
But that there had been shots fired in the Capitol before, and there's actually, you know, you don't like the idea of shots being fired at the Capitol.
Depends on why they were shot.
Well, I guess. But, I mean, it wasn't so long ago when they had the big tax, revolt and stuff during the Sunquist administration that there were folks protesting outside the Capitol and throwing rocks. Well, and I'm glad they didn't have guns.
That's true, but every report I've heard about the existence of the bullet damage in the Capitol keep in mind. Every report I've heard indicates that those firearms were shot by government officials, not citizens.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to Paul. Paul, good morning.
Well, good morning. Good morning to your guest there.
Hey,
Good
Paul.
morning.
Well, count me as one of the critics that opinion holds no water. So, Nick, your guest there's rationalization to me is simply ridiculous. Now, he talks about 29 other states statistics have no higher incidence than other states without the constitutional carry. Look, Nick, constitutional carry, to me, is just another loophole. It's just another loophole to let nuts like a George Zimmerman or people with mental issues carry guns. That's all it is. It's just another issue. It's just another loophole to get people with more guns. Your guest there's answer to everything, every problem in America is more guns, more guns, more guns. He talks about Ron Ramsey. Ron Ramsey has been a NRA guy his whole life. And look, Jimmy Napier and them, they put the signs up because Jimmy Napier and them knew that having guns in the Capitol is not a good thing. And look, the reason why there's bullet holes in the Capitol staircase, and I've seen them myself, is because they figured out back in that they didn't need to have guns up there. Look, Nick, my final comment is this. 150 years ago, wide up in Bat Masterson figured out 150 years ago that everybody walking around with guns was not a good thing. And it seems to me that this Republican-led people on the Hill up there have forgotten a lesson that we learned 150 years ago. Adding more guns is always not the correct answer. That's my comment, buddy, and God bless you, and God bless your guest.
Thank you much, Paul. And you can respond. I do remember the movie Wyatt Earp and that scene where he took over the bar and he started taking guns away from people coming into the bar because there was drink and gambling and shootings and all that. And so, what do you think of Paul's point?
Well, I think Paul's got every right to exercise the privileges given to him by the First Amendment, but that doesn't mean we throw the Second Amendment out just because of an opinion. If there was data, if there was any reasonable proof to show that the risk is increased by allowing citizens to make the choice of whether or not to arm themselves for self-defense, then I think there's room to debate permitting, training, fees, and all of that.
Well, then is the idea of a constitutional carry and why you advocate something like this passing because you view the permitting process the way it is now as nothing more than a money grab that's forcing, a financial hardship on those who want to buy guns? I mean, in my mind, if it's not so much that, then I'm like, well, okay, maybe we can quibble on whether or not it makes a difference or not, but it can't hurt, can it? So why not? Even if just by chance it keeps it out of the hands of one George Zimmerman, maybe it's worth keeping it there. What do you think of that? I mean, what's your reasoning? Why do you support it? Is it a money grab?
Well, part of it may be the money grab. I don't know that was the reason they did it on the front end. I think on the front end, in Tennessee at least, because I was there when these debates took place, is they weren't comfortable that issuing permits, allowing citizens to carry was safe. I mean, I know one of the people that was against it vigorously, he was a House member at the time, became ultimately Senator Doug Jackson. He was a House Democrat serving on the House Judiciary, and he fought it very hard when he was a Democrat and his peer, Representative Ben West, a Democrat from Nashville, was carrying the legislation. And Senator Jackson finally realized and said, hey folks, my concerns about citizens carrying guns were misplaced. And he was one of the most vigorous advocates against it. And he says, I want to do what I can when he became a senator to help remove these restrictions on where citizens can carry. And he did that until he retired from the General Assembly. So if there's a concern, and I think there was back in the 90s, that we need training, we need to impose all these fees, we need to fund the ability to do background checks. If there was a concern that would make us safer, then that could be debated. But once the evidence accumulates over 2 decades that it doesn't, and that 29 other states' experiences prove that, then we don't need to retain a system that's expensive and yields no benefits.
To your knowledge, then, we haven't had any shots taken in any of these state capitals of these states.
No, not that I'm aware of.
I mean, that would be a huge national story if it happened. Off the top of my head, I can't think of that.
It happened in Canada.
in Canada. There was, okay.
A few years ago.
Let's go to Helen. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Hey, go ahead, Helen.
Well, this is about the permits and training for guns. If you drive a car, you have to go get a permit and you have to learn how to drive. And that's for the safety of people. And to me, it's only common sense that if you want to get a gun, you should get a permit and learn how to use it. Things have changed now. They're not like they used to be years and years ago. I can remember when you drove a car without a permit or without a driver's license. But now it's changed, and I think it would be beneficial to everyone for them to go ahead and get the permits and have to go through training before they handle a gun.
I mean, her statement there, and thank you for your call, Helen. I mean, it really seems to make sense. I mean, any amount of training is good. I'm not going to accept anyone saying proper training is bad. End of story. There's no debate there.
No, we say that.
Training's good.
We say training's
good, and you advocate that. I know you do. Now, maybe you don't want it mandated, but that seems to make sense, what she says, right? You know,
well, it sounds reasonable.
What's the
issue
unreasonable part of it?
becomes,
Yeah.
is there any evidence to show that requiring these people to have training, which in Tennessee on an automobile is basically driving around the block without hitting a telephone pole,
Yeah.
does it really make us safer if we're then going to turn them loose on the interstate at 70 miles an hour? Is that really the training, or is the training, which in Tennessee is optional, the student driver classes that you go take? None of that's required to get the driver's license. And so what TFA advocates is more an issue of personal responsibility, not government oversight, is that if you are going to take make the choice of carrying a firearm, you need to go affirmatively get trained from people who know what the law is and how to instruct you on self-defense. It's because self-defense is a lot different than target shooting or hunting. And you as a citizen need to go do that if you're going to carry. But the training class that you have to have, I mean, I'm certified to teach the class that you have to get the handgun carry permit is really no better than what the Department of Safety makes you do to get a driver's license, and that is drive around the block and not hit something.
Yeah, it doesn't take much, does it?
No,
no. That's the thing. And so, are you really prepared to handle an interstate after its experience?
And so
really?
I agree with her. You've got to have training. A reasonable person would have training, but there's no evidence to prove that the training as a condition to being allowed to carry is beneficial.
Taking a break on that note. When we come back, more phone calls, couple lines open if you want to jump in. Interesting conversation here with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association. More right after this. Stay with us.